Mark, we've had some pretty in-depth podcasts today, and wow, they're challenging me, they're provoking my thought, and just thinking we've got to get the message out about hope.
Yeah.
And that we're not crushed by the challenges of life, and there's a way out.
Yeah.
And
even if it takes you 20 years to process the experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you and I both shared. Well, I've shared I'm a slower learner than you because I was 45 when I started getting it, right?
Yeah.
What's important is that we keep pursuing a heart of excellence and what that means, which is really a lot of forgiveness, healing, and grace. So we're sitting here with Bonnie hearing her story, tumultuous home life maybe, and close relationship with her dad, but then, man, 16, 17, those years, it's so important for a daughter to have her dad around to affirm her because us boys are looking for a girl that needs to be affirmed, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't go well. It's not right. And she gets into a relationship with a young man, gets pregnant, is in church youth group, and has to deal with all those emotions and big decisions. And now we're kind of just talking about, okay, we're past the abortion. Her dad is gone, and she's trying to figure out life for 20 years. Like, what isn't working so well? But if you can pick it up from there in those 20 years, how would you summarize the journey, what you were looking for, what didn't work? And then maybe you can start, well, let's just tackle that for now.
Okay, well, so I graduated and, actually, I got married before I graduated.
College?
No.
Oh.
High school.
High school? Oh, wow.
Yes. In my senior year.
Oh, wow.
I sure did. And I had reconnected with a high school sweetheart. Mm-hmm. And he was already graduated, and we started dating actually the November after my abortion, which had been in the summer.
Mm-hmm. And you were a junior at that time then?
I was a junior. Yes. Let's see. I was already I guess I was a junior. So, yeah. Yes. So I dated him, and then in my senior year, I married him. Mm-hmm. And within about 6 months, we got pregnant. And mm-hmm. I have my son, Danny, mm-hmm. from that marriage. We're not married any longer. We didn't make it for very long. We were both young, and by that time, I had some pretty good baggage going.
Yeah. So, only at 18 or 19, right? But so let me ask you this. Having Danny, having the abortion, mm-hmm. okay, so you found out you're pregnant. Does any of that play into this?
Well, I tell you, it does. One of the things when I was pregnant with my son, I realized I was in a bad marriage. My husband had already decided that he was going to start messing around. And so I went through my entire pregnancy married to him. And so it was very hard. And I started, unfortunately, wishing that I wasn't pregnant during that time. And at about 6 months into my pregnancy, I realized what was real and what was lasting was the child inside of me and not my marriage. Yeah. So I started getting excited about this little partner that was in my tummy. And he was born, and I stayed with his dad up until his first birthday. And so I was a single mom for a little while, and he was such a great child. But when I was in the hospital ready to give birth, my fear was that because I had aborted my first child, that something would be wrong with Danny. That
physically,
punishment,
or mentally. Yes, that it was divine punishment, because I didn't understand my loving God at that time. I only knew the God that gets mad at you, the Old Testament. So when he was born perfect and beautiful, to me that was the greatest moment of my life. And he's always been such a wonderful child. And I never really felt like I deserved such a wonderful child because of what I had done. But And then when he was very young, I remarried a man who loved us both, but that only lasted 10 years. And now that I look back, we both had our stuff, because I really believe that when you marry someone that is carrying something similar, and I guess later on in life I realized that if you wanted to attract the right man, you need to be the right woman.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that at the time. So in my brokenness, I attracted someone who was broken, but he did love us, at least for a while. And when he left, I was 35.
Any children in that marriage?
No children.
Was that intentional?
Yeah, I guess it was. For whatever reason, I think we talked about it, and my son was always, I want a brother or sister, but we just never got pregnant. So, which was good in hindsight that didn't happen. But by then I was 35, and he had left me. And then, interestingly, I had always heard from the Lord. I'd hear things or I'd know things, but I didn't realize that was the Lord in my life. I just thought I just knew things. And I would pray, but it was usually prayers of, if you'll get me out of this, whatever it was I had gotten myself into. Yeah. But at about I was 37, and I had remarried, and this time I had married someone that I had not done proper due diligence on, and he just seemed like he was too good to be true, and he ended up being too good to be true. And anyway, so at age 37, 1 year after having married this man, I had to leave for my own safety. And it was during that time that as that marriage was ending, I was looking for a way to give back in the community. Yeah. And I thought, I love being a mentor, so maybe I could do something like that. And everything I would look into, it just kind of fell flat, and it didn't, I didn't stick with it. And then something really amazing happened in my life, and I really just want to let you know that my mother, by then, of course, she knew about my abortion, and she worked for a pastor in Houston, and that's Dr. Ed Young.
No.
And she said to me, would you like to come to church with me on Mother's Day? She worked for that church. And I said yes. Now, at the time, I lived in the Woodlands, and I attended Woods Edge. And one of the things that was so amazing is that I was leaving church. This was 2 weeks before Mother's Day, where I was going to attend church with my mom. I was at Woods Edge, and I was walking out after a service, and I was in the lobby, and I looked over, and there was a table that was set up. And at the time, I did not know it, but it was set up by people that worked and volunteered at PACN. And I walked by because I was just curious, and I saw that they had baby models, and they had brochures and things like that. And I looked to see what they do, and it was that they help girls in crisis pregnancies. And I walked by, and I just went, that's nice. And I just walked on by, but in that moment, it was imprinted on my memory, because the Lord was going to show me something.
Okay, so because I don't want to get too much in the PACN just yet, because we're going to do that in depth.
Yes.
So these years between 17 and 37.
Yes.
So 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years, exactly what you're saying.
Seems to be a magic number, huh?
When people are listening to this, because there are women that listen to our podcast too, I noticed. When they hear your story and they're going, I think I identify with Bonnie. Can we dig a little deeper in that? And again, we don't have to answer anything, but how did you feel about yourself? Like, what are the feelings that you wrestled through in that period of 17 to 37? You've had the abortion. You as you said, you had a few two marriages at that point, I think. And you're kind of like in the prime of life, that 30s, right, is the prime of 35, prime of life. What's going on in your self-esteem at this point?
Well, I was always a hard worker, but I became a workaholic. I became a perfectionist, not toward other people, but toward myself. And when you're a perfectionist, you will never reach your standard.
Yeah, it's impossible.
So when I use the term masking, like, because we're always trying to mask our pain and our hurt, is that fair and accurate to say then you're using work to mask that hurt or whatever it is that in your heart?
I would call that my medication. An achievement. So
for self-esteem?
Yes, for self-esteem.
Gotcha.
Also, what I didn't realize then that I now realize is I didn't ever want to be alone with myself. I was always going. I would never stay planted at home. I didn't understand what peace was. I'd never experienced it. So I was always going. And I realize now about myself that I'm actually not, I don't know how to say it any differently. I'm not that outgoing. I really love being alone. I love times of peace and quiet. But when you're running from something, I only know how to explain it as I was running from myself, and I didn't
from
want
your
to
thoughts.
be
Yeah.
What do you think you were running from?
Pain.
And what was that pain?
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but it was. I think it was never being able to be peaceful and never able to feel like, I'll just give you a really good... I've said this so many times. If you ask me about my life, I'd say which one. Because I went from relationship to relationship and I established marriages. I had pictures of those marriages. So if you ask me when it was all said and done, which life? There wasn't just... The only thing that was my constant was my son through all of that.
Wow. So 20 years have come and gone. You look back, what's your thought?
I'm 37 years, I've got nothing to show for it.
And now you're questioning yourself because you're going, I'm 37, I've got nothing to show for it. What's missing? What was the question you asked yourself to start a journey to pursue the thing that would bring ultimate fulfillment to your life?
I always thought it was a man.
Oh, interesting.
I really didn't have faith in myself. I didn't realize what a competent, capable woman I was. I thought that I needed a man for a meal ticket. I needed a man for affirmation. I was incomplete without a man.
Do you think a lot of women's, and I think I know the answer, but do you think a lot of women still wrestle with that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Maybe not because of a past of abortion, but for whatever reason, upbringing, I'd say, a whole bunch of women. Yeah,
we need to dig in that later on in our podcast. So then the question, I'm sorry.
I just had a question. This might be a good time to ask it. Is because one of the things I read on the internet is that, and I'm not an expert, it's just kind of like you just hear about it, but I hear some statistics that women who have abortion also have kids and they're fine, and obviously as a man I can't relate to a woman, so I don't know what's the truth. And I guess from your perspective, is that are those women who are supposedly fine, are they really fine, or is that something that they're still coming to grips with from your experience and the people that you meet with?
A resounding no. They are not okay. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they say. They're not okay. And this kind of gets into my healed side, but having been a woman in the corporate world, after I was healed, which we'll talk about, I felt like I had X-ray vision. I felt like I knew when a woman had an abortion, and so I shared my story constantly, and it never was told in vain. I know those were divine setups, but I would just be at a business dinner with a woman, and I would begin by saying, "Well, I had an abortion, and my life's changed and things. And a woman that I've spoken to, and I have spoken to so many women, they'll start to say, well, I had an abortion too, and she's trying to say fine. And before she gets to fine, she's in tears. Resoundingly, I would put every paycheck I've ever made and ever will make on that one. They're not fine. If they're fine, they've stuffed it. And I stuffed it. I never knew I even needed healing, so I understand that. They have done soul damage. Some of them recognize it. Some have not. They haven't recognized it.
And we're going to pick up on that.
Okay.
But you were at 37. You looked at your life. I'm not married. I was married. All this stuff.
And now I'm going through a divorce again.
And now I'm going through a divorce again. Was that number 2 or 3? 3. Somewhere along this line, because I know you made a pretty life-changing decision and had an impactful moment. I don't know what it was to be where you are today. Because when Mark and I meet you, you're vibrant, you're alive, you have purpose. You're willingly sharing your story, as messy, as broken as it is. Here you are talking about it, knowing it's going to be on a podcast that anybody in the world can listen to. That doesn't happen overnight. Something happened in your life, I presume, where you go, okay, I'm 37. What am I going to do different? What was that? What happened in your life that started you on a journey of healing, restoration, grace, forgiveness, all this powerful stuff?
Well, I think women who are not even believers ask the Lord for forgiveness probably 1,000,000 times following an abortion. And I had asked what feels like 1,000,000 times for God to forgive me, but I could never receive it. And so I'll pick up at the part of the story where my mom asked me to go to church with her on a Sunday, on a Mother's Day. And I got to church, and if you've ever been in that church, I think it's since been remodeled, but Second Baptist Church on Woodway, it's a big church, and it has pews all the way across the room. And so I walked in and sat down with my mother in the middle of a pew, which means I couldn't get out to the left.
You were trapped.
Or to the right. And so Dr. Ed Youngs begins talking not about, he starts talking about abortion, and here it's Mother's Day. He was talking about the sin of abortion, and he wasn't mentioning grace. And I sat there, and first I was outraged that he would talk about that, and that he would talk about it on a Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And then it was my moment of truth. And I began to weep. I bypassed tearing up. I began to weep, and I was ugly crying, and I had water coming out of nose, eyes, everything, and I could not get out. And I knew everybody knew my secret. And as soon as I got out of there, I walked very quickly, and I was angry, and I was angry with my mother because she knew what he was going to preach on.
Set up, huh?
Yes, and but what that was for me was was my moment of truth, and that was a Sunday. And later, at some point that day, I remembered what I call the table with the baby ladies at Woods Edge Church. And so Monday rolls around, and I called the assistant over, Jeff Wells' assistant at Woods Edge, and I said, I need to find the baby ladies, and she knew what I was talking about. She gave me the number. I found out where it was. I went over. I got up from my desk at lunch, and I went into PACN. We were at a different location then. And I walked in, Miss Drama Queen, and there was a volunteer at the desk answering the phones, and I walked in and I said, I need to help just one woman understand what the truth is and choose life. And she says, well, hang on a minute and let me get the manager. And she went and got the center director, and her name's Karen. She's still a center director here. And that was 18 years ago. And I said, I need to help girls. And she said, well, that's great, and we want you to, but you have to get healed before you can help any girls. And I didn't understand it at the time. I understand now that you can't have a trigger when you're trying to help someone, because then you can't help yourself either. And so I said, okay. And she says, well, we have a post-abortion Bible study, a healing Bible study. And I said, okay, sign me up. And I have to say that after even though I didn't know that I was carrying all of that for 20 years, all of a sudden I knew what I was carrying for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was heavy and I was done. Mm-hmm. And I said, sign me up.
So how about we stop right here?
Is it tough?
Yeah. Again,
time has got to stop flying by.
So, Bonnie, that means you're gonna have to hold you hostage for another 20 minutes.
Are you good for another episode?
Sure. If you can, I'm good.
All right.
God bless you guys.
That's too engaging. Sorry. Thank you.